Shalom friends, we are covering the topic of the Audi A5 in a new video, which gives a little more information about my mental state and things you should know if you plan to buy an Audi A5. Actually, it is one of the best German used cars you can get for a smaller budget. So sit back, citizen, take off your pants, please like the video for the algorithm, then optionally put your hand back in your panties, take your cell phone with the other hand and subscribe to this channel. The Audi A5 8T entered the market in 2007 and is based entirely on the Audi A4 B8, even though it was released earlier. First there was the coupe, then in 2009 the cabriolet and the sportback, which is a 4-door coupe version with a stroke and is about as sexy as women with dark bristles on their legs. The A5 is solidly built and shows only little wear on the interior after years of use, as long as you don't have some sort of corrosive sweat. Since it is basically just an A4, there is a lot of plastic used and the optional leather seats are sporty and thin, which is not even bad because they last longer than the average Marriage. The body is mostly galvanized except for the front fenders, which are made of aluminum. So you won't find any rust here, in theory. If there are some brown spots, the previous owner is a lying pile of misery and is hiding poorly repaired damage or a sick perversion in which rust is one of his erotic fantasies. Usually aluminium does not rust, but in some cases it does indeed corrode. Not only the fenders, but on the trunk under the taillight as well. Owners often didn't even notice that. If problems arise, they are usually with the keyless go, the fuel cap and door lock not opening, the window regulators not working, or the steering on pre-facelift models. You can tell this by the fact that the steering wheel vibrates at around 70 miles per hour and the feeling is as pleasant as Uncle Hubert visiting you at night with unconventional toys. Then in winter the frameless windows can freeze and the air conditioning often fails, which is due to a defective air conditioning compressor, which often fails at Volkswagen products. Therefore it is always important to touch everything and check whether it works or not. Just make sure the seller doesn't touch your back. There are usually no real problems with the electrical system, except you are lucky just like me, who bought a German car from America and ended up with some redneck wiring skills, but this is another story. You should make sure that the convertible top properly fulfills its sphincter-like functions and does not cause any further problems because every cabriolet has rooftop issues as age progresses. This can be a little bit expensive, but like any other convertible it is a question of wear and tear. The facelift came out at the end of 2011. You get a new design of the LED headlights, which are actually the same as on the A4 facelift, and newly designed LED rear lights. Almost nothing has changed in the interior except for the individual displays and a slightly better quality feel. Apart from that, all engines were revised. The 4-cylinder petrol engines in particular have been improved. Until 2011 they were literally garbage. The EA888 engine is installed in the 1.8 and 2.0 TFSI. It's shown with a significantly high oil consumption after less than 60,000 miles. The biggest problem of this engine here is the undersized piston ring, which coke up and lead to an increased oil consumption. At the end the entire pistons have to be replaced, including the connecting rods. And at the same time you should also replace the timing chain and chain tensioner, as this will cause consequential damage and also is a problem area of this engine. In the end it all costs a lot of money because the engine has to come out. The engines often had to be replaced entirely. Without a trained trailer park mechanic connection it is not worth it, especially if the vehicle is too old, like a 16-year-old girl for Golf GTI owners. There are solutions that make the engine last longer, but it still has to be taken out and this is also very expensive. It is therefore very important to change the oil after 6,000 miles. European spec cars change their oil after 30,000 kilometers or every 2 years, which owners tend to forget. The EA888 engines have got better since 2011, but the engines have only been really solid since 2015. Therefore these engines are not worth it unless you know what you are dealing with and can take preventative measures. So like a pubescent brat who is already thinking on Sunday evening about what flimsy excuse he will use to escape school on Monday in order to grope himself in the women's locker room. The 3.2 FSI is not a VR6 engine as some minorities claim. Instead it is a normal 3.2 V6. It's not the 3.2 FSI from its predecessor, but a newly developed engine which is less prone to engine failure. Primarily carbon buildup and timing chain rattling can occur, which is primarily due to the long life oil change interval in Europe. Some articles claim that the water pump and spark plugs are items that tend to fail, but these are expendable parts you can change after a certain time. So if some random NPC redneck spawns and tells you about that, you have the permission to spit on him and remind him of this new thing called maintenance. From 2012 on, the 3.2 FSI engine was replaced by the 3.0 TFSI with a supercharger that can actually have the same problems. The more powerful 6-cylinder supercharged engine was installed in the S5 from the facelift onwards, except for the convertible and sportback version. They already had it in 2010. Here the water pump and thermostat are considered vulnerable and higher oil combustion is also possible due to a defective crankcase ventilation. Carbon buildup is a problem as well due to the direct injection system. Change the oil frequently and use additives and you will have fewer long-term problems with most engines. Before the facelift, however, a 4.2 FSI naturally aspirated V8 engine was installed. The RS5 also has a 4.2 FSI V8 engine installed, which is also used in the Audi A5. Here you can additionally have problems with the camshaft adjusters, which are very expensive. Otherwise, high oil consumption is normal here, which is why it would be smart to change the oil every 3 to 5,000 miles if you want it to survive longer than 5 minutes. Basically, the 6 and 8 cylinder engines are solid if you don't treat them like garbage or Sandra. The diesel units usually only have the typical diesel problems: intake manifold flaps on the 3.0 TDI, dirty EGR valve, injectors due to the carbon buildup at higher mileage and a full DPF in the long term, a defective air mass sensor, fuel pump, exhaust gas temperature sensors and differential pressure sensor can also cause problems, but those are easy fixes. The 2.7 TDI is basically a 3.0 TDI with less power and higher fuel consumption, so like a son who just happens to look like the Bulgarian postman. The timing chains on this engine are not considered chronically unreliable here, but due to the bad oil change intervals some can expect an earlier defect. In contrast to the other 4-cylinder engine, the 2.0 TDI from Volkswagen has a timing belt and usually is known for causing less problems. Leaking water pumps are a popular topic, so are the turbochargers or its pressure cell and high pressure fuel pump. EGR, DPF and carbon buildup are among the typical diesel problems. Here too, additives, early oil changes and driving warm and cold are essentially for longer durability. If the DPF gets removed, you can increase the lifespan of each diesel engine. It is illegal in some countries, so you have to watch out, but you pay CO2 taxes, so it should be alright. The 6-speed manual transmission is only problematic in the pre-facelifted S5 with the V8 engine. The 6-speed automatic transmission called Tiptronic usually causes no problems if you change the fluid after 40 to 60,000 miles. The 7-speed dual clutch transmission, namely S-Tronic, is a little more fastidious and needs an oil flush and new transmission oil every 40,000 miles. This is basically the same DSG transmission installed as in the Volkswagen GTI models, only installed lengthwise instead of crosswise. The Multitronic is a continuously variable automatic transmission that also needs to be flushed after 40,000 miles. Unfortunately, the gearbox is vulnerable, which is why gearboxes often had to be changed within the warranty. This only occurs on front-wheel drive models. The rest have one of the other transmissions installed because they have all-wheel drive. You know your car has an all-wheel drive if it says Quattro somewhere, provided that you are able to read. When it comes to the suspension, you have either a dynamic suspension, a deeper and harder S-line sport suspension, a normal sport suspension, or the dynamic suspension with electronic damper control, which is also available in conjunction with the sport suspension but not with the S-line sport suspension. The RS5 has the optional DRC suspension, where some people complained about rumbling noises. For some market the DRC was not available. When it comes to equipment, I would go for leather seats, Bang & Olufsen premium sound system, PDC with rear view camera, all-wheel drive, electrically adjustable seats, large navigation system, 2-zone automatic climate control and Beast Xenon including LED daytime running lights. Unfortunately, there are actually people who drive around in such a vehicle with halogen lights. This looks extremely retarded and should be punished via social exclusion and avoidance of this fringe group. In terms of tuning, 20-inch rotor rims would be sufficient along with a subtle lowering of the vehicle. If you want to go all in, additionally get an RS5 body kit, get some wheel spacers, tune the engine and install an exhaust system. The best and most solid engine for this car is definitely the 3.0 TDI. With proper care this lasts forever. It's economical, quick, reliable and very common. If well maintained, you can buy a model with a higher mileage if the previous owner has taken care of it. Frequent oil changes and the walnut blasting for the engine internals are highly advisable. Removing the DPF is very healthy for the turbo, but unfortunately it is illegal in most countries, since an act like this is punished more severely than loving someone against their will. So the maneuver of removing the DPF is not recommended. Personally, I would still do it because it extends the lifetime of the engine, your fuel consumption is lower and it has more power. If you live in a diesel-free country, you should aim for the 3.0 TFSI supercharged engine. You can easily tune this engine to a RS5 level. Audi A5 models cost between $7,000 and $25,000 in the United States. In the UK they cost between £2,500 and £70,000. In Europe such a model starts between $5,000 and over €30,000. If you are considering getting an Audi RS5, you will have completely different problems anyway. But you should be aware that the maintenance is particularly expensive here, as prices for brakes and insurance alone are very high. But you should be able to have around 30,000 laying around if you want to buy one of these. This way you don't have to offer your body online for money in order to pay the repair bills. If you are smarter than before, then consider subscribing. Like and share this video if you want to spread the good word of this channel. If not, you can please your mother orally.